What's up everyone? It's a bit of a different video this week. So this video is going to be going over first how to get your music onto Spotify and similar platforms like Apple Music and Amazon Music and that sort of thing. And then it's going to be tips on how you should be getting streams on Spotify in 2020. The methods I used to get my first million streams on Spotify from absolutely nothing last September. And some bonus tips on how to get some free advertising to get the ball rolling and what you should be doing outside of Spotify to be promoting your music and build an audience. So I was planning on making a video about how to find success on Spotify in 2020, and I actually got an email from DistroKid, who is the distributor that I use, asking if they could sponsor one of my videos. So the plan is to incorporate that as well. So I've not got a bad word to say about DistroKid, so I was happy to do it. It just means that I can also include how to get onto Spotify for those of you who aren't actually on Spotify yet. So yeah, I'm just going to get into it, starting with how to get onto Spotify. So this applies for Spotify and things like Amazon, Apple Music, TikTok, all the various different platforms that you're going to want to get onto as a musician. The best way to get onto these sites, and often the only way to get onto these sites, is by using a distributor. So you send your music to a distributor, and the distributor sends the music out to all these different platforms. So the one I'm using at the moment, as I said in the intro, it's actually DistroKid, and it's the only one I've ever used. It's something you should definitely look into. There's so many different distributors out there at the moment. It is a bit of a minefield, and there are definitely good and bad ones, and there are benefits and setbacks to each. And basically the one I found to be the most suitable for me was DistroKid. Now the thing that made DistroKid stick out to me was firstly that there's a one-off payment at the start of each year, and they take no commission on any of your earnings. So obviously if you are just starting out, potentially going for one of the other distributors who maybe post music for free, but then take a commission on any stream that you receive during that year, might be the better option. However, that said, I started off in September 2019 posting my first track on Spotify, and I didn't expect much in terms of streams, but I did surprise myself, and I'm already at sort of 1.5 million streams a few months later. So it's definitely possible to exceed your expectations, and it's probably worth going for a fixed price plan so you know how much you're going to pay. So when it comes to the actual plans, DistroKid has got several different bands. The first band is $20 a year, and the second band is $36 a year. However, if you do want to sign up for DistroKid, I've got an affiliate link in the description below, which will get you 7% off your first year. So that might be worth doing. I don't think they have other promotions on other than affiliate links, but it might be worth checking in case you can get it even cheaper than that. So I would recommend shopping around, but if not, 7% off with your first year in the description below. So they've got different bands, and I went straight for Music Plus, which is the second band, which is $36 a year. And there's various levels after that. If you're a label or a manager and you've got different artists that you want to manage, or you've got different aliases, then potentially look down that route. But yeah, I went for the band 2. And the reason I went for band 2 is because it allows you to set a release date for your music. And that's actually really important for, number one, getting onto Spotify editorial playlist. So to get onto the playlist, you've got to have a set date for release, and it's got to be at least a week in advance. But ideally you want it to be a couple of weeks in advance before you actually release it. If you want to get onto the playlist of your followers, the say weekly discover playlist, then what you're going to do is have a release date that's a few weeks in advance. Gives you time to submit your music to Spotify editorial playlists, and that also automatically includes it in the weekly discovery playlist. I'll get onto that in a bit more detail on how to get streams on Spotify, but effectively I would highly recommend going straight for the second band, because it gives you the option to not only get onto the followers playlists that are generated by Spotify, but also it gives you the opportunity to apply to be on the huge Spotify editorial playlists, which can make a huge difference in terms of how many streams you can get. Another great thing about DistroKid is, firstly, the uploading screen is very easy. Another great benefit I found is that sharing revenue from songs is super easy. I've noticed that most of the musicians I've collaborated with, I think all of them except for maybe one, have had DistroKid anyway. It's sort of that popular. And the best thing is that if you're collaborating on a song, it's super easy to include them firstly when you're uploading the track, so it makes sure that it's on their Spotify as well as yours. And it's also really easy to split revenue, so you don't have to worry about setting up a contract to pay people, because you can just split the revenue 50%, and then before you've even got it, 50% of the revenue will go to whoever your collaborator is, and you can change that if you want to work on a different percentage. So it's really easy to collaborate with people, and collaboration going forward is one of the points I'm going to be talking about in the next half of the video. The only sort of negative I found so far is the stat page seems to be a little bit off on DistroKid. So I think at the moment mine's saying I've got like 7 million plays, which isn't true. However, I would definitely recommend not going off this anyway. For Spotify specifically, getting the Spotify artist page, which is really easy to do once you've submitted the track through DistroKid and it's gone live on Spotify. You can claim your artist profile, which lets you change the description, the profile picture, set your own playlist and that sort of thing. So yeah, that is DistroKid. As I say, definitely do your own research. There are different options out there, but generally my recommendation would be to go for DistroKid. So now to the main video, I'm going to go over 5 sort of key areas that you need to be focusing on in 2020 to get more views and build a following on Spotify, and also extends to other platforms as well. So the 5 key areas are playlisting, collaboration, building your following outside of Spotify, download gates, and then some options for getting free advertising, as well as some paid options to consider, and the paid options you shouldn't consider. As I said earlier, you're going to want to get your artist profile set up. It gives you live stats of who's listening now, and it lets you completely customize your profile on Spotify. And as another benefit, it lets you submit to editorial playlists. So I've submitted a track at the moment for editorial consideration, and that's because I had a plan that allowed me to set a upload date for my track. That was far enough in the future that it allowed me to submit it to Spotify's editorial playlists, which takes me on to my first point, which is playlisting. As you probably already know, with Spotify, one of the best ways, if not the best way, gain an audience and gain plays on Spotify is through getting onto different playlists. So that could be, as I've just mentioned, Spotify's editorial playlists. What we're going to focus more on is musicians' own playlists, or different curators that you'll find. So when it comes to getting onto playlists, there's a few things that that I would recommend focusing on. A lot of people may take the method of just sort of finding anyone with a playlist and spamming them a link, and saying, please listen to my song, upload it onto your playlist, which most people would tend to ignore. I would make sure firstly to do your research and make sure that the song is actually going to fit the playlist that you're submitting to. If it's a lo-fi hip-hop playlist and you're sending some fast housey beat, it's going to get you firstly ignored by the person who's sending it if they ever do listen to it, and it's probably going to annoy them, and you may end up building a bad name for yourself. So when you actually do send them a beat that they might like, because you've wasted their time so much in the past, that might make them not want to listen to your stuff. Make sure your music fits the theme of the playlist you're submitting to before you send it. But you may have just finished a track and you're not really sure of any playlist that would play that sort of music, or you don't know many. So one trick I'd recommend doing then is trying to find songs that are similar. So if you had a song in mind when you were making the track, or there's tracks that inspired it, one thing that's good to do is to search for the track on YouTube and see what channels are posting it. So at the moment, most YouTube channels will have, if they're music channels, they'll have their own playlists. And if you can find all the channels that have posted the song that's sort of a similar vibe to yours, they'll probably have playlists that fit that style of music. So it's a great way to find new channels to promote your music too. So once you've found a bunch of playlists that you think your music would fit into, the next thing you want to consider is making sure that it's up to a good standard. So it doesn't mean that you're making perfect professional sounding beats every time. That's not always necessary, especially with some sort of styles like lo-fi, hip-hop. It's not always essential, or it's even beneficial sometimes to have a track that doesn't sound perfect and pristine and studio quality finish, but you want to make sure that it's still interesting. It's not sounding that there's no major flaws with it, that it's up to the standard of the rest of the music on that playlist. Because if you start sending out links to different curators and it's not up to the right quality or standard, then you're going to find initially that you won't get placed, but you also, again, might start making a bad name for yourself. And then when you actually have got music that's perfect, they may just be at the point where they're not even opening your links because they've not liked any of the previous music. So you want to make sure that your music is up to standard by sending it to your friends, or even asking for feedback sometimes if you've got a relationship with some of the different music creator playlists. But yeah, try and make sure that it's you've polished it and it's the best you can do, and it's sounding up to the same sort of quality as other songs within the playlist. And another source of Spotify playlists would be finding Facebook groups that fit your sort of genre. So I know within lo-fi there's various different groups about that I started off with that will be really well suited for A, finding feedback on tracks, but B, they usually always have Spotify playlists that you can submit to, and there'll be competitions for different, and there might be remix competitions or various competitions for flipping samples that they would put onto the playlist if you were successful. And it's sort of a great way to find a community around your music, and they may even have, I know a lot of the groups will have lists of different playlists that fit their whatever genre it is. So it's always worth looking on Facebook, trying to find groups that fit the vibe, and a community where you can build sort of relationships with different people within that genre, which really helps with finding playlist placements. Another thing that links in with this but also expands beyond the scope of playlists is looking for collaborations. So I know I made a lot of new fans on Spotify through collaborations with different artists, even if they're smaller than you. Maybe obviously it's great if they've got a bigger following, there's more people exposed to your music, but even if they are a smaller channel, there's still new people there that may not have heard you before that you're getting exposed to when you're collaborating with new artists. So the good thing about collaborations is that firstly, it's half the work often. It can be easier to make a track with someone else. You don't get stuck as much. If you get stuck, you can send it over and work off each other's strengths. As well as that, it gives you sort of music new life and new ideas. If you've been making music on your own for a long time, having a second person come in, so it's definitely worth doing that as well. Music, or just make your music sort of stand out a bit to your listeners and sort of engage their interest. Also, it's great to get a name for yourself with fellow musicians within the genre, and it really helps boost your credibility. And as well as trying to get onto Spotify playlists, gaining exposure outside of Spotify also definitely trickles through. So for example, if there's a music channel that doesn't have a Spotify playlist, it's still worth submitting your music to it if you think it fits the mood and target audience of your music, because even though they might not necessarily have their own playlist with followers that they can add you to, just having your music shared by a YouTube channel can boost the traffic to your Spotify, because if people like the song, they're going to go looking for your music on Spotify or whatever other music service they use. On to number 4, which is download gates. So if you don't know, a download gate is basically a step that means that for someone to access your download, they've got to perform a step that could be following or sharing a video or liking something. And it's often something that's overlooked within music. However, it's a great way to build an audience, especially when you're starting out. If you are putting your music up for sale, you might get the odd person who supports you, but if you've not got a very big following, then you're gonna struggle to get any sort of sales of your music anyway, and you'd be much better off giving it away for free, but with a download gate in front of it. So if someone listens to your song on SoundCloud or Spotify, they can go onto your Facebook page or YouTube channel or your website, and they can download it for free, so long as they follow you on something. And I'd recommend initially you want it to be a download gate where it's unlocked by following on Spotify, and this does a few things. So the first thing is gaining followers on Spotify. Firstly, it means that when you post new music and you post it a few weeks in advance, you submit it for artists and you submit it to the Spotify editorial playlisting, it will automatically go onto their Discover Weekly playlists, or their automatically generated playlists from Spotify for new music. So straight away, if you've got an audience that's listening to their new weekly music every week and you're posting a song every couple of weeks, you're going to be on those playlists. You might get a couple of listens from each person, and it starts to rack up the plays on Spotify. And the second thing is, when thinking about editorial playlisting, when you submit a song and you've got a larger following, you've got more chance of being heard, and more chance of being put onto these editorial playlists than if you had 0 followers. So often if you get a good playlist spot, it might result in hundreds of thousands of plays, but it might not necessarily mean that they'll click through and follow you on Spotify, because it's not always what people do. They might just be listening to the music in the background and they're not necessarily going on to each artist that they like the song of and following them. So this is another way of getting those followers. If you get in the plays, you also want followers to come in, and you do get followers when you get in these playlist spots, but often it's not enough to start to get the ball rolling. So having these download gates means that you'll get the followers, you'll be on their playlists, and you've got more of a chance of getting onto the editorial playlist as well. If they're downloading one track of yours, they're going to like the other music you've got on Spotify, so they're not going to be against following you. It's just maybe that it's not something they would have thought of doing straight away. But this is sort of a prompt to say, you can download my music, you're going to follow me on Spotify, and maybe they will unfollow you if they want to, but a lot of people won't, because as I say, they'll be enjoying your music anyway, and they'll probably want to hear more of it. But one thing to consider is, if you're doing a download link, make sure that it's for the same sort of genre. So if you're releasing a heavy house track under a different alias and you've got a download link to your lo-fi hip hop account on Spotify, there's a good chance they won't like the music from your completely different alias, because it's a different genre. You may not necessarily be keeping the followers that they have. You're building an audience that doesn't like your music, and they'll be skipping music if it comes on, or they'll be unfollowing you, so it's not as beneficial. So you want to make sure that the download gate content is relevant to the music on your Spotify that you're asking them to follow. And the last thing I want to talk about is the sort of paid options as well as the free advertising you can get. So starting with the free advertising, one good thing to do if you're a new musician, you've got no audience, no following, is to utilise a lot of the free first time advertising benefits you get from different providers. So say you've got a YouTube channel, a really beneficial one is the Google Ads advertising. So for example, with Google in the UK, I think if you spend £25 in advertising, you get £75 for free. That's £100 for advertising. And if you spend a little time researching on how to set up these ads, you can get a huge following from that first £100, especially if you're utilising download gates as well. One thing that I do is I give away sample packs, and they've often got download gates in front of them. So when I'm using my free £100 Google ad campaign, I'm getting thousands of clicks on my video, and then a lot of those people are clicking on the download link because they like the content, because the advertisement is targeting people who like the content that you're putting out. So it means you'll get a great click-through rate, and people will start following you in different medias as well, so Spotify, etc. Google do one, Facebook do a free £10 advertising when you start. I think Twitter do, Bing do a huge free one at the moment, and there's various others. If you Google free advertising incentives, there's a lot of them, and they're really worth doing. And there's also a lot of other services out there that you should definitely avoid. So if you are going to pay money to advertise your music, I would definitely do it through a legitimate stream, and try and do it when you've got deals and incentives to do so. You should get the most out of it that way, as opposed to a lot of the websites that are offering, firstly they're offering flat out just pay for plays. I would definitely avoid them 100% all the time. Generally it's just spam, and it's probably not going to get you any Spotify revenue, because Spotify pick up on the fact that that it's a dodgy and it could get you banned from Spotify. And the same thing with followers. If you're paying for followers, you're not getting legitimate followers who are going to listen to music. You're just getting bots that are numbers that aren't going to do you any good, and it'll make it look like people are skipping your music, or your fans aren't listening to your music, so avoid things like that. Avoid things where you can pay for followers, streams. So I hope you found some of this video useful. Please comment in the description below if you've got any of your own tips that might help, or other artists that are starting out.